Okay. Well, Hotep family, Hotep, peace and blessings. I greet you in the name of God and the ancestors, in whose footsteps I most humbly walk. His brother Ed Mojo from the Pretoria International Film Festival for we have a very interesting interview here with Third Coast Books. Two of the founders are on with me, and we're going to be talking to them about Third Coast Book. What is Third Coast Book? Where is it located? How can we get in touch with them? What do they do? So we have Ron Mumford, who's on. He's a publisher, author. He's a journalist. He was a journalist major at the University of North Texas. He worked for several newspapers, magazine. And check this out, fam. He's a combat correspondent, combat photographer in the United States Army. He received 2 Brown Stars. So definitely this gentleman has been in action in more ways than one. So we're going to be interested in having also on with us from over on the other side of the pond. Is Uccn Gorman, the associate publisher and editor. Now, Uccn covers the UK, Ireland, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand for Third Coast Books. So it's very interesting to have them on. I welcome them to the show and say, welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for spending some time with the Piff connection. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Well, it's an honor to be interviewed by you, Ed.
Well, it's you know what? It's nice to talk to you finally. Well, almost face to face, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I've been reading about Third Coast Books, and it's very interesting because I have a lot of questions for you all because we see a lot of things about publishers and about book publishers and stuff like that, and I think talking to the two of you was going to shed some light on publishing for some people who are interested in publishing. And some people, Ron, when I was reading some of the stuff, there are some ups and downs to publishing a lot of us don't know about. And right. I think you could definitely throw some light on some of the things. So tell us about Third Coast Book. What is Third Coast Books?
Third Coast Books is what's called a hybrid publisher. Okay. I think one of the big publications, Publishers Weekly, printed an article and said that hybrid publishers are on the rise above all other types of publishers. What a hybrid publisher does is we charge an author just the amount it takes to actually publish a book with the editing, the cover, transferring it from manuscript to printed book, ebook conversion. We do a book trailer for them. And then after that, we start marketing. Okay. And our marketing is something probably that nobody else does to our extent. We not only market to like Facebook groups, reader groups in probably 15 countries that have a total readership or membership of about 10 million, which incidentally doesn't do the trick. A lot of people try it. But we also have a marketing staff that we do news releases. We send them out to a very specific group of people in the literary industry, even Hollywood Weekly, New York Times, LA Times, to their book critics. We do a lot of news releases, and then we have come up with lists that took us a year and a half to do with influencers. Influencers are in movie and TV, podcasters, book reviewers, and book bloggers, some of which have hundreds of thousands of followers. Okay. This is going direct to the people that actually buy books. And then after another year and a half, we came up with a list of over 1,000 executive producers, studios, directors, and development personnel in the movie industry in 8 countries. We have personal emails on these people so that when we publish a book, and we're very selective about what we publish. One thing that we look for is something that can be made into film or TV, whether it be feature film, scripted or unscripted documentary. We have the author, and we send them the template, but we have the author do a screen treatment, not a screenplay, because most of our authors are not they're not script writers.
Right.
And besides that, we found, and goes back a ways, that most of the producers and directors have their own screenwriters that they like to deal with. And if you send them a screenplay, they're going to look at it and they either like it or reject it, both. But if you send them a screen treatment, which is basically 7 to 9 pages that list, you know, the protagonist, the antagonist, the short synopsis, scene 1, the setup, scene 2, the conflict, scene 3, the conclusion, then it catches their eyes, especially if you have a very crafty log line, for instance, that will catch their eyes.
Right.
So what we do for our authors is probably more than any publisher that I know of, to do, not only taking the manuscript to book form, but to market it and try our best to make it into a movie, feature film, scripted or unscripted documentary. And when you look at the number of authors on Amazon that have a book made into a movie, it is so minuscule, it's unreal. And we have the theory that if we have a great book that's worthy to be made into a silver screen, that the books will sell the movie and the movie will sell the books. So that's pretty much who we are. We have taken such a different approach, and it's mainly because of experience. As I mentioned, I'm an author too. I wrote my first novel in 1992. I had 2 different agents, literary agents, that were well-meaning, but did nothing. So being an entrepreneur, I had some cards printed up and said, Ron Mumford, literary agent. And I went to several writer meetings in Houston, Denton, San Antonio, Austin. I got several manuscripts because that was before the internet, back in the late 90s. And I went straight to Lower Manhattan. I walked into Simon & Schuster, scared to death. And when they saw a literary agent from Texas, they rolled out the red carpet. I spent all day in Simon & Schuster, going to the different editors of the different genres. I even met Stephen King's editor because I had a horror book that I was pitching. And I spent all week in Lower Manhattan, went to Warner, Putnam Penguin, you name it. But only to find out that if you weren't a celebrity, if you didn't have book sales on your last book of about 500,000 or more, the barriers to Lower Manhattan killed you. So I took screenplays 2 weeks later and I went to Hollywood. I mean, I just dove in. I actually got into Morgan Creek Productions inside the Warner lot, mainly because the director of development was a young lady from Texas. So I got in to see her, but it did no avail. It was the same thing, barriers. If you don't have your script with ICM or somebody, we're not even going to download it and look at it. So I had a good friend out there, Joanne Lara, that had been a producer and an actor on some HBO films and some films there in Hollywood. And she kind of took me under her wing and she said, Ron, why don't you go talk to some indie producers? And I said, what's that? She said, well, there's the people like did Fargo, you know. It wasn't affiliated with a huge studio. They had low budgets and all that. So I started contacting some independent producers there in Hollywood. And what was wild about this, Ed, they had little bitty offices right next to a 7-Eleven store, you know, in a strip center.
Okay.
And I'd go in there and they'd say, what do you have? And I'd give them a quick pitch and they'd say, what else you have? I did 5 pitches in 5 minutes And again, there was a barrier to entry. So at that point, I was just about ready to get out of all of it. I did have several books published of some really great authors. One of them was a Christian romance writer from Jacksonville, Texas, that had over 120 books in print, and she went out to Word and Tyndale and Harvest House. I got her a 7-book deal at Harvest House, but I never sold my own. So years later, after I'd taken a company public on NASDAQ 5 days before the crash of '87, after I was not only swimming with the sharks, but became one, just as Uccn did. I was a licensed financial consultant with Smith Barney and later Merrill Lynch. And you know something, about the time I was getting ready to retire, I said, I'm not done yet. Because there's an old saying in the author business and writing business, if you quit, you lose. Don't quit. So we started our own publishing company. We got a lot of great authors, and we're very selective. And we started working our plan and planning our work, and it's working. And when Uccn came on about a year ago, I'd worked with Uccn before. Uccn is so smart, such a wonderful editor and project manager. We put on some more people with a chief marketing officer, and we're just off to the races now. What we're doing works. So that's Third Coast Books.
Wow. Okay. In a nutshell, that's in a nutshell.
A bit more than an elevator pitch, but yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But I like what you said. You know, you give us a good little background on Third Coast Books, where it started, why it started. You know, out of frustration and being swimming with the sharks. So that's very interesting. I thank you for that brief history on Third Coast Books, because I think there's a lot of people who are listening who could identify with what you just said from their experience in the industry, because you're not the only one that went through that. I have heard so many horror stories from publishers and stuff about trying to get into that front door and then trying to go to a screenplay. Oh, forget it. That's another story. That's another horror story within itself.
Exactly.
So thank you, Ron. So Uccn, how did you end up back in the UK? You're back in the UK. I see you went to school over here. Now you're back and you're covering several territories for Third Coast Books. So what's your story?
Well, obviously, I was from the UK originally, and
Yes.
When I was doing my bachelor's degree up in Glasgow in Scotland, I met a couple of very interesting characters, let's say, but one was a lady from the US, and I ended up, she was doing a master's degree at the time, and when she finished, I worked for Guinness for a year, which was a brilliant job in the whiskey business. We decided that it was easier for me to move over to the States than it was for her to get permission to remain in the UK. Americans trying to come into the UK has been historically quite hard to do. Okay. So I took a 3-week break from Guinness. I flew out to Omaha, Nebraska, got driven around, shown all this lovely stuff, and was just wowed. I mean, it is totally different out there. I mean, it's just not a matter of space; it's a matter of attitude. And people try in the US, I've known people who've tried so many different things and failed before they figured out something that works for them. In the UK, you really don't get that chance. You fail once, there's no reorganization type bankruptcy here. You go down to the shirt you're wearing, basically, in the UK. So we don't have that entrepreneurial culture here. But I got settled into the US. Got asked, what did I want to be? And it's like, I've always wanted to be in the financial business. Got myself a job with A.G. Edwards in Omaha. Lovely, conservative financial company based out of St. Louis. Went and started to do my MBA at the university there.
Mm-hmm.
And after a few years, I'd moved out of that business and was working for a company. It was like the second fastest growing company in the US in the early 90s. And we outgrew Omaha and we needed another base for several reasons, but we were rehiring people that we fired in Omaha because there just weren't enough people. Wow. And we ended up going to Houston. Okay. So I was working for this marketing company down there for a couple of years. Ended up leaving them. They wanted me to move back to Omaha, but I'd settle in Houston. I like being in the South, more dynamic city. Made lots of friends down there. So I stayed down in Houston. Ended up meeting Ron at a public relations firm, and we were having a great time there. Around, what was that, 2000, around the time of the dot-com bubble burst. We had loads of wonderful small companies that we represented. I mean, they really were. I mean, real small-scale companies that were on the up. And that dot-com bubble burst early 2000, and it just washed most of these guys straight away.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And,
I remember that.
And soon after that, I ended up at. I had some friends. Ron Wilson and Bob Harris, who were both originally from Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
And they wanted to start a company, and we got introduced to a lovely doctor at Texas Southern University, a guy called Oscar Kreiner, who's still there. I mean, he's like 76 years old and he still works at the university. He's, cool. he will work there forever. He's the first African American to get a PhD in mathematics from Berkeley. He's a super guy. And anyway, we got this company going. I helped them edit up and do the financials for a big grant application to the Department of Labor of the university, and we ended up winning it.
Oh.
And the professor came to me and said, well, I now need somebody to help organize this, do the reports, make sure that we spend the money right, and we keep out of trouble. And it's like, you want to come to the university? I'm like, well, hell yeah. So it's great. Don't know if you know Texas Southern, but it's a historically black university.
Yes. And
it was just wonderful. Those were actually probably the best years that I had out there. It was just an amazing environment to work in. I got drafted in to teach a class down there. Unfortunately, the person who was supposed to give the class was permanently detained. And it was sort of like, hey, you've got a degree in physics. And it's like, well, yeah, do you want to teach a introduction to physics class, general science type class? And it's like, well, yeah, I guess I could. And it was like, well, here's the book. The class starts in 10 minutes. I'm just going to go introduce you. I was like, yeah, hey, why not? It's great fun. Cool. But yeah, and after that, I stayed in the grant field. I went to work for the Harris County in Houston. They were setting up a new grants department to make sure. Again, it was all reporting, editing, ensuring all the federal regs were followed.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was settled in there, but then something happened with my family, unfortunately, and I had to come back here to the UK.
Okay.
And then linked up with Ron. Well, we were talking about another publishing related project a couple of years ago before this one, and then this one came up about a year ago, and it was like, yeah, I'll come on board. it is great. It's so different from anything else that I've done.
So let me ask the two of you. I'm listening to the story, how things came together between the two of you. As if I was a writer, what type of writers, what kind of work do you guys look for? Is Third Coast Books really interested in? Are you guys like interested more in horror, adventure, drama, love stories? What type of work do you all look for that you feel is your niche?
Ian, you want to continue or want me to jump in?
Yeah, a bit. Yeah, I mean, you know, we got some authors that do I sort of like armchair mystery books, which are
armchair mystery
fun.
books.
I mean, the sort of books that you just want to, you know, sort of curl up in your armchair in front of a fire and read. You know,
Okay.
you know, not. Yeah, there's sort of murder mystery types, but then they're very comfortable types of books for people to read. I think the most amazing project I saw we got involved with earlier this year involved a gentleman who has, let's say, represented the US government around the world on several projects or missions, and he wrote a book based on a trip he made to the USSR in 1984.
Okay.
And very. I mean, that's the sort of thing I like. Personally, I like military
1984.
history.
That was Gorbachev's time, right? Gorbachev was still in power then, right?
It was just before Gorbachev got in. It was when I think it was Andrei Gromyko was premier, but
Okay.
he was already basically in a walking coma state at that point. And yeah, there was a situation, let's say, where the US government was trying to maybe interfere with the Russian internal politics a little bit.
No way.
So that the reformers could step in. And it's really good. It taught me something I didn't know. It taught me that Yuri Andropov, who was between Brezhnev and Gromyko, Chernyenko, was much more of a reformer than people realized. I mean, being head of the KGB, but he had realized how far behind the USSR had fallen behind the West. Because he was the intel chief. He knew what was going on in the outside world, whereas a lot of people in the Soviet system didn't know they didn't know that they didn't have it so good. So surprisingly, at that point in time, it was the KGB and the security apparatus that was actually trying to promote change in Russia. So yeah, that was absolutely fascinating. But as Ron says, one of the things we're always looking at is whether the work can be adapted for TV audiences or movies. And it really is unusual. I don't know how to put it to people. Somebody's approached me this week and sent me a list of questions concerning how realistic their chances are of doing as well as they want to.
That's interesting.
I mean, you can have a perfect book, no mistakes, great story, and getting it in front of people how many books are published a year on? It's way over 1 million in the US a year, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So it is an uphill thing. But if you've got a really good product, that's the start. I mean, unfortunately, we see a lot of stuff that, we ask people that they have their work edited properly before it's sent to us. And there's so many that we see that you can just tell they're essentially chancing it. They've not invested the time and the effort in preparing their manuscript. And because of the way that we do things and the fact that we essentially do things on our cost basis.
Mm-hmm.
If the work isn't sufficiently of a sufficiently high standard, we just can't take it on.
Good. Yeah, I got. So,
Uh,
based on what you're saying, it sounds like yeah, you can't take it on because of where you guys go from.
Where we're trying to go with it, yeah, you're right. And also, I mean, if it's something that's sent to us that's going to need, weeks of editing, we just don't have. We can't farm that out to somebody and at the price point that we operate at.
Right. Gotcha.
You can pay $5,000 to get a work fully edited. We're publishing for less than that.
Ed,
wow. Yes.
let me jump in here just a little bit. I'll give you some of the diversity of books that we publish. We have 2 nonfiction books by Dr. Paul Wagner, who's head of the psychology department at University of Houston, Clear Lake. And his first book was called Love Trauma. It's all about what a psychologist does about the traumas of divorce. His second book, Beyond Love Trauma, was teaching people, as in counseling, how to get past the traumas of divorce, because it's like a death of a relationship. So that's one. We got in 2 more books from R.M. Morgan from California. Rick Morgan was an investigator for the state of California. He investigated accidents and bridges and all kind of things. And when he retired, he became another Mickey Spillane. He writes the best murder mysteries that you'll never be able to tell the end to if you tried to. Like I said, he's like another Mickey Spillane. And then the Putin's Useful Idiot that Ian just wrote. What a thriller. I mean, it's just like you're on the edge of your seat, and it's based on a true story. And Kenyon Kane, the author, is writing another one right now called The Belfast Brotherhood, something similar that he did in Northern Ireland, with the IRA. Yeah. And he said that was even more dangerous than the first one. Wow. So we and then we get books in like Ariana's. I mean, I'm an author, and I'm writing a trilogy called Wayne's Angel, and it's a Christian fantasy, and it has some dreams in it. But when we looked at Ariana's book, I went, my gosh, this girl wrote that when she was 12 years old, and it handles and manages characters in basically 4 dimensions. And the most skilled writer would have a hard time doing that. So that manuscript just screamed child prodigy. And we have to be able to recognize things like that. And then I'll tell you, it's easier to tell you what we don't publish than what we do. We can't publish children's books. We refer them to a really good friend of ours, Liz Lawless in Dallas, because of the size and the graphics and everything, and KDP doesn't print those odd sizes. But we do refer children's writers. We don't publish erotica. We don't publish porn. We don't publish hate books of any type, because we want to publish books that have a high degree of integrity. We don't like books with a lot of expletives in it. I usually tell the authors, hey, you need to expand your vocabulary a little bit, if you know what I mean. And we just like to keep it clean. We like to keep it interesting. And we're open to all the other types of books if they're well written. Now, when I was in Lower Manhattan, I'd ask these editors at Simon Schuster and Putnam Penguin, I'd say, what are you looking for? Because I had been in sales and marketing all my life, and that's the first thing you do. What do you want? And they said, we're looking for great writing. And I said, that's a cop-out. Define great writing. And they said, we'll know it when we see it. And to tell you the truth, that's a good answer. Most editors, especially with the Big Five, if they do get a submission, they're not going to read over the first 6 or 7 pages. And it either hooks them or it doesn't. And there's no saying, especially with novels, start as close to the ending as you can. That's where you start.
Say that again, start as close to the ending as you can?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I never heard that. Okay.
Yeah. If you read the classics and everything, and I've read a bunch of them. My favorite was Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, around the turn of the 1900s in Russia. But a lot of the old writing, even Hemingway, they go on and on and on before they get into the meat of the story. Well, that was then, this is now. This is a time of, I want it now, hook me early, tell me something that intrigues me to make me turn the next page. And as readers of manuscripts, when they come in, that's what we look for. We want for them to hook us, get us excited right away. But if it's in the case of a memoir or a narrative nonfiction, yeah, you've got to spend some time to build up a background. In my trilogy, Wayne's Angel, because it was going to be a trilogy, I didn't introduce my main character until the 5th chapter, because doing 3 books on the same subject, I had to develop my characters. I had to give each, and this is important, I had to give each one of them a very distinctive voice, where when they talk, you almost don't have to put said Joe or said Sarah. By the way they talk, you can tell who they are. And it's very important for writers to do an analysis on their characters and give them separate voices.
Okay. I like that you say start as close to the end as possible, so that way you're talking about you're looking to hook your reader from the jump, so that way you could actually get them to read through the whole book, so that they'll be eager to get to the end of the book. Right.
And another thing is, nowadays, sometimes we'll get in manuscripts and the authors will have like a 35 or 40 page chapter. What they're not realizing is you've got to give the reader a break. How many pages can you keep a reader on the edge of their seat? So I don't like to see chapters over about 15 pages when it's in print form.
I guess that, I'm sorry, go ahead. I guess that's a good, what you just said, that's pretty interesting. I'm thinking, when I used to live in New York, you see people reading books on the train, and then you get to your stop, you got to stop reading to get off the train. So, so I mean, having short chapters gives you actually an opportunity to stop reading, get off the train. If you're switching trains, you've got to walk to work, so that way you don't have to, try to find your place again. That small chapter will give you will be your pause in your reading.
Exactly. Exactly. I remember when Rick Warren, the preacher out in California, he wrote a book that sold 65 million copies, and it was called The Purpose-Driven Life. And he submitted it, I think it was HarperCollins. And HarperCollins, and he has this letter framed on his wall. Some of Rick Warren's chapters were 3 pages. Some of them were 10. But he had 44 chapters in his book. And the editor at HarperCollins wrote him a letter and said, Rick, nobody will read a book with 44 chapters in it. And he sold 65 million.
Oh.
So sometimes you got to just go for it, and we like that. We like out of the box. We like don't conform to every rule you hear. Break the rules.
So let me ask you a question, Ron. Based on what you just said, for writers who are listening and watching this interview.
Right.
In today's world where things are moving so quickly like that, you know, you have hard copies, you have your Kindle and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What would be your advice to a new writer, a new author who's trying to get their books out there and get that number sales up?
And get their sales up? First off, I would say manage your expectations.
Okay.
Every author, including myself, when I wrote my first book, I decided, well, I'm going to get an agent. I'm going to get $1 million advance. I'm going to build a house in Colorado, and I'm going to write better books than John Grisham. Well, that was in 1992. I finally published that book in 2017.
Okay.
The thing of it is, Ed, you know, when I told you that just putting books on social media won't do it, it won't. I used, before Facebook had their Facebook deal with all the reader groups I had put over 100 posts on social media in a day and just kept going. It did not move the needle on book sales at all. Then we had an author that said, that was fairly familiar with radio and TV, and he said, I'm going to use the 30-second trailer that you guys did, and I'm going to put it on late night TV. And I went, late night TV is local TV stations after 2 a.m. And most of them will give you viewership, usually 30 or 40,000. So we did, and you have to put 10 or 15 spots on there. And they're fairly inexpensive at that time. It's about $50 a spot. But we ran 10 spots on a large TV station in LA. And that's where our producer lived. It's where the author lived. It was on Rick Morgan's, R.A. Morgan. We ran 10 spots. We spent a pretty good amount of money. Did not sell one book. So we're sitting here thinking, we have done everything in the world. And that's where we came up with 2 ideas.
Okay, I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes.
That's okay. And our 2 ideas were this. Do screen treatments and make a deal with producers and directors, because again, the book will sell the movie will sell the book. It may take 2 years, but we don't quit. And the second thing, I contacted a friend of mine from the University of North Texas that had a TV marketing place, and I said, you know, we're running these late night TV ads and they're not moving the needle. What do you think we ought to do? And he said, that's where he said, go to the influencers, the podcasters, the book bloggers, the book reviewers, the ones with the highest following. And it'll be hard getting on their shows and everything. You've got a great product and great marketing. They're looking for people like your authors. So that's what we started doing. So my very best advice to authors is social media. The more exposure you have, and it's what we told one of our authors, there's no such thing as too much marketing.
Right.
But just social media is not going to do it. And you have to go out to influencers like I just mentioned. You need to try everything that you can do out of the box. I'll give you an example of something that did happen. We don't publish erotica, but E.L. James that wrote 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah.
Erica L. James is a housewife, married, mother of 2 in New Jersey. And she wrote this book, self-published, put it on Amazon. It took 2.5 years, but the word of mouth got out. The buzz got out. And she sold 2 million books, self-published. And then a large publisher, and they watch book sales on Amazon, came along, offered her a huge contract to sign with them. She did. They made 2 movies out of it, and she laughed all the way to the bank with $100 million. word of mouth cannot be,
It's
there's
priceless.
nothing better than word of mouth.
It's priceless. It's priceless.
But it took her 2.5 years to do it.
Okay.
That's why I said, if you quit, you lose, Ed.
No, I'm with you on that. Being a photographer and doing in the multimedia business, I always say word of mouth is the best, because people will not tell other people, their friends. If they don't like something, they will not tell their friends about it. If they do like it, they'll tell their friends, and if their friends know them and respect them and say, if you're telling me about it, it's good, I'm gonna go get it. That word of mouth, and then the word of mouth is just like a pebble going down the hill. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So it might take 2 years to get down to the hill, but when you get down there, you're looking good.
Yeah. Well, it's like when, and Ian has heard the same thing. We were both licensed financial consultants, but there's no saying in the brokerage business, good deals keep getting better and bad deals keep getting worse. And it's the same thing with books. That's the reason we're so selective. And we're open to so many genres. I would love to have some good, clean romance. We need some romance. Romance is hot. Teen and young adult books are hot. And but we're open to most genres if they're well written, and we can work well with the client. That's super important. We do everything that we can, Ed, to gain a client's trust. We work hard. We're an open book. They want to know a question, an answer to a question. The best things to do is either call Ian and I, and we'll tell them straight out. We don't come to the table with cards up our sleeve. We come to the table laying our cards on the table.
So it sounds to me, Third Coast Books, you guys got rid of a lot of fluff and puff, and you made yourself nuts and bolts. You get to the basics. You save money on both sides, and you make money on both sides. Am I getting that correct? Someone listen to you say?
Pretty much, yeah.
No, I like what you're saying, because a lot of times, the fluff and puff wastes your time, and you have nothing to show for it. So, but when you get down to the nuts and bolts of doing something, the simplicity, keeping it simple, KISS, keep it simple. Keeping it simple and putting it out there. Mostly in today's world, where people's attention span is shorter because there's so much stuff in social media, there's so much stuff happening. You have to be able to hook them really quick and hold them. And it sounds like, what you guys are doing, you've gotten rid of a lot of stuff, and you're looking at the nuts and bolts, what works and what will sell the books. That's what it sounds like to me.
That's true. I mean, I was going to say as well, as far as the interactions on the movie side, which is so, how to put it, they are very delicate at times, but it goes both ways. I mean, we have authors with great books that want to get turned into movies. We have other people in the movie business who are working on movies, where they've written screenplays. They're coming from the other side, coming back towards us, and they now want to convert their movie scripts into books. Then we'll publish the books for them. So there are I guess until you start looking at it, if you look at the number of movies that have been made over the last couple of years, where it's just screenplay by so and so. It's not based on the book written by a certain person. So that's good too, because we've got quite a pipeline heading towards us right now of books that are going to relate to some of the movies are already in production. So
let me ask you a question. You just said something I never thought about. What is your preference? A book going into a screenplay, or a movie going into a book? What is your preference, and why? If you have a preference, why? Ron, stop laughing. Answer the question, Ron. Stop laughing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I give you an answer to that too, but I think you sort of already know it. Because we're saying, you know, we're doing everything based on the fact that books sell movies and movies sell books, right?
Mm-hmm.
And statistically, it is much harder to get a book made into a movie. If you've already got a movie, making a book from a movie is relatively easy to do.
Okay.
And you've got both parts of the puzzle or the pie or whatever right there. So, you know, yeah, it's to me it seems a bit easier doing that way.
So
yes.
what if, yes, go ahead, Ron.
Let me break in here. The reason I was laughing is tell you a quick story that's real. After I got about 75 producers and so forth on my list with their personal emails, I pitched Rick Morgan's book, Crown Hunt, which is a murder mystery. And the log line was Chinatown. You remember that one? Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson, yeah.
Three Kings, George Clooney.
Mm-hmm.
And when I put it out to those 75 producers, the pitch, I figured, well, now I'm going to wait 2 weeks, see if I get any response. 15 minutes later, my phone was ringing with an area code from LA, and this fellow by the name of Keith Barrows, executive producer of Montalvo Media and 360 Studios, that speaks with a very heavy British accent, lives in LA, called and he said, "Ron, this is Keith Barrows. I want it." And it was just like that. I didn't know Keith from Adam. So the next thing we had to do is we went to IMDb, we checked out his credits, we talked to him for a long time. And over the course of a year, Keith mentioned, he said, we'd like a Blumhouse agreement with Third Cut. And I got to tell you, I had no earthly idea what that was. Thank goodness for Google. So I Googled Blumhouse agreement. It's an agreement between Jason Blum, who is a young producer in Hollywood, that works with M. Night Shyamalan on $8 million horror films. And they made an agreement with Doubleday Publishing, where if they had a script that they were going to make into a movie, they wanted Doubleday to turn it into a book and cut them in on royalties. And I went, So basically, right now, Keith has about 5. How many books does he have, Ian?
We got 8 that we're looking at right now. 8 projects, yeah.
8 books that he's got scripts for that he's going to make into a movie, that his people are turning those scripts into books, and we're going to publish those books and give him a royalty of what we get. That is I've got a friend named Chip McGregor, wonderful, wonderful literary agent, one of the best in the U.S. And I called Chip and asked him about this because he's done a lot of movie deals. And he said, "Ron, you don't know how fortunate you are. This is phenomenal." So we're doing it both ways, Ed. We're taking their scripts and turning them into books because they're going to be made into movies.
All right.
And he's taking some of our books, turning them into film. It's a wonderful arrangement.
That's good. Now let me ask you a question. As I'm listening to you talking, is it more difficult to get a book published if the movie bombed? Say a movie came out and it did horrible, and to take it into a book, is that more challenging, or it doesn't make a difference?
It does make a difference. I'd say it's a huge difference. If the movie, for instance, I used 50 Shades of Grey. A lot of people hated the movie, but it was a big success, and it sold a ton of books. There are a lot. I'll give you an idea. in the United States, of course, everybody in LA is a screenwriter.
Of course, of course.
There's probably 150 to 200,000 screenplays written per year.
Okay.
Hollywood, and I'm going to get off into something else real important. Hollywood makes about 650 movies a year. So that gives you the odds of getting your screenplay made into a movie from 150,000 to 650. However, guess what has happened? The distribution has gone worldwide with people like Netflix, A&E, HBO, Hulu, National Geographic, History Channel. Netflix put out an information, a news release saying that they were going to spend $20 billion per year on new content.
New content. I remember reading something about that on, yep.
But I'll give you some more information. Here's the hook. I have a bunch of people on Netflix on my producers list, and I pitched something to them, and it was just like Hollywood. They said, look, we're not going to look at your screen treatment. We may have other works in process that would conflict with that. Sorry, but don't contact us anymore. So what I did is I contact those producers that work with people like Netflix and A&E and so forth like that. They take it to Netflix and A&E to get funding for their films. Okay. So you have to learn and be adaptable. You have to know the right path to take. Go ahead, Ian. What were you going to add?
Go ahead, Ian.
I can't even. I mean, yeah. I mean, the need for content. I mean, if something we've sort of learned from lockdown now is like TV channels here, they're not the local production has stopped. They're having to run reruns of soap operas from 40 years ago to fill slots right now.
Yeah.
So there's such, and they're adding. They've had these new channels come out. We have Sky TV over here.
Right, I know Sky.
Satellite system, and they have been adding channels left, right, and center the last year or so. They've even added a few more recently, even with the lockdown going on. But there's just such a huge demand for new, innovative content, stuff that's really relevant to what's going on in the world today. Anything historical. I mean, these channels are having to dig so deep into their rerun boxes right now. So because they've got nothing, they got no new releases going on.
So let me ask you a question, Ian. That's something I know over here in the U.S. I was talking, like Netflix and them. They're looking for content. A lot of people they're just looking for content, because they know there's so many scripts out there. There's like we don't want the scripts, we want the content. So how does that affect if it does, how does it affect your business?
The only way it can affect us is positively. It does make it a little bit, knowing that the demand is there, they're looking for stuff. It's just finding the people who are in the pipeline, let's say, to supply that. So you've got producers out there that have signed up to provide so many hours of TV shows per month or whatever, and they are then looking down for people to supply them with ideas to fill that out. Some of these guys we've been talking to, they'll do feature films, they'll do 3-part TV series. They're into so many different things. So it is good for us. I mean, there is now a sort of backlog of demand, let's say, for new content, and they can't do anything. I don't know how many. There's going to be some production companies, obviously, that don't survive through this process now. But the younger, more agile ones will take their places.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we just got to link in with those guys. Let them know that we've got something for them.
Right.
And
right.
The trick with, as Ron's, the screen treatment is it gives them enough. They can look at a screen treatment. They can look at the locations. They can look at the number of cast members. They can look at the sort of the character profiles. They can almost budget the production cost based on the screen treatments. There's enough information in there for them. They're not just looking at a book.
Right.
If they see something that fits what they like to do or what they know they need to provide to somebody else, it's all there. They don't have to research. We've basically cut out some of the research for them as well.
Yeah, so from what you're saying to me, because you guys have taken it down to the nuts and bolts to keep costs down and keep profit high or higher. I mean, I think you have done a lot of work for them, because the executive plan, executive summary, the treatment, your pitch deck, I think those things gives you a good idea of how much money you're looking at to put into a project. Am I saying that correctly?
That's right. It helps them figure that out. And the other thing, anybody who looks at what we charge for what we do, if they actually sat down and researched what it would cost to self-publish and do all those pieces that we do in our package, they're gonna figure out, look, our investment of time is not covered by what we're charging people. Our investment is investing in the author and their success in the future.
Right.
Yeah. Because people will think, oh well, we're paying you to publish, and surely my book's good. If I could get in, if you could get in with one of the big five, they'll pay you to publish your book. You lose control of your book with the big five.
Yeah.
They do it their way, and you don't really have a say in it. So somebody who can't, everyone should try that route. If they can't get in that way, then we're their best option.
You just said something. I don't know. For me personally, I like what you guys do, because I like to keep control of my work. I like to have, when you go to, like you said, when you go to the big publishers, you lose a lot of control. Sometimes you lose all the control.
Yeah. And
so it comes down to, the big publishers might get you out there faster, but how much control do you have over your work? Do you have to give up? And for me personally, I like keeping control. I like keeping control of my work, so that way it's for me, the integrity and the love of what I do is the reason why I do it.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Ron. I see you. Ron, you're forming at the bits, Ron. Go ahead,
Ron. For one thing, we draw a fine line between what we do as a publisher and what producers do. As a publisher, like I said, we don't make a penny on a book. We pay vendors to get it all together, do the marketing, and so forth. We make our money on royalties when the book is sold, just like the authors do. Now, as far as pitching it to filmmakers and so forth, we do not raise money for them. We do not do pitch decks for them. We publish books. And if an executive producer like Piff or someone else, in my mind, there's two types of producers, and these are my definition. There's a Hollywood producer that has funding in the bank. He has investors.
Okay.
He can choose what he wants to do and start on the film. Then there are indie producers, like are going to Netflix and Hulu and so forth like that. They don't have funding. And what they do is these indie producers go to these distributors.
Uh-oh. Ron, we lost you. Are you there? Ian, can you hear me? Uh-oh, we lost them.
Or a per episode scripted or unscripted documentary.
Okay.
And they have to go out and find their funding. So Hollywood producers, as I call it, they already have investors. They got money in the bank. And then there's indie producers, and some of them have investors. But most of them will go out to Netflix and the distributor conferences, raise their money. They want usually a 15-month free option on a book, so they can have that time to go out and raise their money and then start the film if Netflix or somebody is interested in it. But like Ian said, due to the fact that everybody has binged out on all their old favorite movies, their favorite TV shows during the pandemic lockdown, people are crying for new content. You just have to know how to get that content to the right type of producer. And then when they do a pitch deck, I've seen several. A pitch deck is usually all the actors and actresses that have been signed for the projects and their former credits and so forth, budget on the movie. But a movie budget, like Ian said, cannot be established until the producer figures out the script, the locations, the actors, whether A-list or B-list, how much they're going to cost, the FX involved, the special effects. All this comes to form a budget. So it's a very involved process. If you look on Google, a lot of the big Hollywood producers, Clint Eastwood, Tom Hanks, whatever, it'll take them 4 to 7 years to put out a movie from the time they get the script to the time they put it out. Producers that have funding, producers that are getting funding from Netflix and everything, they can have a movie out in 2 to 3. And again, here's the kicker. There is no guarantee on a movie coming out. There's 1,000 things with distributors and lawyers and everything that can blow the whole deal. So it is a jump in there, work hard, form some really trustworthy friends and producers and alliances, and go for it. Don't look back.
Ron, once we've got financing indie prods, we can get it out a lot quicker than 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, okay. Hey, Tony.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were on the screen.
I texted you.
Doing an interview between Ian and I. I will tell you this, Ed. Tony is the one that taught me how to write screenplays way back when. He's written over 100 of them. So anyway, just kind of let us do our things and listen in, my friend.
Okay. Well, just so you know, it's my daughter's birthday, so I'm just kind of stopping in to say hi. I haven't seen you in decades.
I know. Happy birthday to your daughter, buddy.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
So, so Ron, yeah, you're talking about that's very true, because this pandemic showed us, for example, Marvel and DC has had to reshuffle their schedule because, the theaters are closed and everything like that. Disney was forced to put Mulan on the Disney Plus channel. So like you said, so as you look at all the planning that went into making all these movies and scheduling, went out the window with the pandemic. So, like you said,
the marketing plans,
yeah,
It did.
So, like you said,
it's like the the new Bond movie. When was that supposed to be out? April.
Oh, they rescheduled that twice already. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, every
Well, but
time they do that, they're throwing away all that marketing investment they made.
Yeah. Go ahead,
Let
Ron.
me throw this in. A lot of these producers, for instance, the New York producer that had 35 top tier clients that he's done movies for, he has a production company in Prague, Czechoslovakia.
Mm-hmm.
The reason he does, part of it is because of locations on several of his movies that require cold and mountains and so forth. But the other thing, they're very talented people there in Prague. They do a great job, and they do it for a heck of a lot less than they'll do it here in the States. When a producer gets a budget, let's say from Netflix or something, the author's going to get part of it, and it cost him X amount of the budget, and the rest of it he makes. So as different countries open up from the pandemic and allow filming to go on in their countries, a lot of these films may be done overseas. Now
If you can get away.
That puts pressure on the people in Hollywood and different states because they have different pandemic rules. And yeah, the pandemic is holding up things, but there's other ways for it to be done.
You're saying something, Ian?
Oh, I was going to say just the recent SAG contract. I've been through that thing, and man, as an indie, I'd go overseas. I will not try to deal with one of those contracts. They're insane.
Yeah. No. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Go ahead, Ed.
Let me ask Ron or Ian. You guys put a lot of information out. How do people get in touch with you all? Because there's people who are listening right now who will be watching this recording, and they're like, they like what you're saying. They like how you do business. Who should be getting in touch with you? And what should they? What should they have in their hands before they get in touch with you? Let me put the question like this: what should they have in their hands before they touch base with you?
Answer that, Ian.
Well, basically, they should have a professionally edited manuscript. Okay. Now there are some other little things that we ask for. We ask for some basically comment blurbs. What readers say type comments, so that we can put those in at the front of the book. But that's the main thing. If they've got their manuscript complete and edited, and you can't edit your own work, okay? I mean, when Ron and I were working at the PR company, nothing went out on the newswire unless at least 3 people had edited it. So if I, as head editor, put together a news release, I gave it to one of my writers, and it might then go to Ron to have a look at it, or it went to one of the CEO to look over it. Mm-hmm. You've got to let other people go through your stuff. I mean, right. I've got a couple of first edition Ian Fleming books I've just inherited, unfortunately, and I've gone through them, and there are errors in those books, and they're worth thousands of dollars. But if you actually look at them, there's missing periods, at the end of chapters and things, How many times have people looked at, these classic books and things get missed, So I would say normally an editor will catch about 95% of the errors. I've got a lovely manuscript in from a chap in Israel right now, and yet it's translated from Hebrew into English. And the person who did it has a master's degree in English from the University of Tel Aviv. When I went through it, there were 1,500 punctuation errors on a book of about 85,000 words. You know, so it really, really, what we need is that, you know, they've had it edited by a professional. Probably before they send it to a professional, they've had friends, other people read it and make sure it's in good shape. I mean, the worst thing that happens is when we get something that's really interesting, but there are structural edit problems in the book that we then have to go back and say, hey, you said that this person talked to this person on this day about something that didn't happen until 5 days later down the timeline. You know, and we've had those and we can fix them, but they take so much more time. And I say, we're not really charging for that. So we want a manuscript that is complete. Everything else is sort of child's play beyond that. The other little things that we need to put into the book to make it complete.
Yes, and Ed,
yes.
To answer more specifically, if people want to submit something to us, they go to our website, which is 3rdcoastbooks.com, and they hit submission on there. And it'll ask them to give us their name, address, phone number, how much social media experience they got, what the genre of the book is, how many words it is, and then to give us a synopsis and first couple of chapters. And all that can be done online. And that goes to Ian and myself and some other people. We look at the submission, which is not the whole manuscript, because we're not going to read an entire manuscript that takes hours and make a decision. We are going to look, just like I said, like the editors in New York, we're going to look at what we request, look at it, and then from there, our next step is we will ask the author to send the entire manuscript because we're already interested. If after reading the manuscript, we like the book, then we're going to put in a personal phone call to that author and say, hey, we're going to send you a contract, read it over very well. I can be your lawyer, whatever you want to do, but we're interested in your book. And when we get the contract, aim it in, we start. We've got a very smooth system to do everything that we mentioned in the first part of the interview.
Okay. No, thank you for saying that, Ron. I asked you that question because, I mean, I know there's some future authors that might be watching this interview. And,
I hope so.
Yeah, so that's guiding them. And what do they need before they go to your website? What background work should they have already done before even contacting you? And that's why I asked that question, because from where you guys stand with the nuts and bolts that you're doing, you're making the process simpler, but it has to be concise. It has to be on point. So that's why I asked you that. That question. So the website is 3rdcoastbooks.com.
Yeah, and the thing of it is,
my background here.
Yeah, I see your background. Pretty cool, huh?
So yeah, you got 3rdcoastbooks.com. Brilliant.
Okay.
So the thing of it is, we want a finished manuscript, whatever the genre is, and we want the author to tell us what the genre is. If they don't know their genre, they need to go back to school.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Whew. They better know this. Okay. We're not going to get into that. But I'm not going to get into that. In closing, I want to thank you all for your time today. Thank you so much. Would you like, in closing, what would you like to say before we say goodnight to each other?
Ian, go first, my friend.
Well, I basically say, I mean, lots of people have had life experiences, or they've developed stories over the years. Go ahead and write it down. Put something together. I mean, you know, I've got friends who are working right now on their own sort of, you know, almost like biography memoir books. I mean, they don't expect them to become bestsellers or anything like that. They want to just put their life into a legacy, you know, something that's a legacy for the family or something like that. People who want to do that, that's interesting too. But yeah, I mean, look at the website. Yeah, we're always trying to improve things. We're looking for people who, you know, who've got great ideas. You know, nobody knows everything. I mean, one of the best quotes I was ever told was, "You don't, you know, you've got to realize what you don't know." You know, none of us can know everything.
Right.
What we do is we focus on what we know. So if other people know other things, hey, our ears are open to them. Go ahead, Ron.
My best advice. First off, Ed, I just wanted to thank you again. It's an honor and a pleasure to meet you and talk with you.
Same here.
Feel free to call us anytime.
Oh, I got your number in my Rolodex now, buddy.
Well, my best advice is this. People are always asking me at writers groups and so forth, what's the first thing I should do? And I said, write the first line. That's the hardest. Write the first line. And then they say, how long should the book be? And I say, when you finish. And that's true. Some people write short stories, which we really don't publish, but some people write novellas, which is a novel, which is synonymous with fiction, but they're under 50,000 words. That's a novella. Anything over 50,000 words is a novel. So I tell them, the first thing you need to do is write the book. That's it. Then after that, go back, look at it, because things that you wrote 3 months ago, you might have forgotten, and then in chapter 15, you might have turned that around or something. That's one thing that Ian's very good about. He looks at the flow of the book, and if things don't fit, he catches it. And I'm going to embarrass Ian right now because he hates me when I do this. But have you seen that show, Brilliant Mind, Ed, with Russell Crowe?
Yes, I had the movie. Yes.
That's Ian. Ian can see things that other people can't. He is one brilliant dude. And I've known him for a long time, and that's what makes him a great editor. He can spot these little things that don't jive with chapter 1 or chapter 2, and it just makes it a better book. So my advice to authors, write the book. Everybody has a book in them. They may need some guidance with some people, but write the book. And it's finished when the story is finished. Then get somebody to edit it, and then start doing submissions.
Okay. Well, I want to thank. Go ahead. You got something to say, Ian?
Nope.
Nope. Ian said nope. Well, I want to thank the two of you for your time today. I know, Ian, you're 5 hours ahead of us in the UK, on the other side of the pond. Thank you so much for your time on Saturday. Ron, thank you for your time out of the Midwest, the Southwest. I look forward, hopefully, doing some business with you all in the future. We'll see what we could do. Let's network and see what we could put out there. I appreciate it.
We're looking forward to it.
Okay, Ron.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, fellas. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, good night.
Good night.